Welcome to Victoria Rumble Room, an island show that likes to rumble. And on this particular show, we're not rumbling quite in the same way because things are actually taking off irrespective of whether we have our gloves off or not. And I'm with my co-host, John Jurisic, who, John, you can maybe explain how circumstances have kind of taken over here in terms of pugilistic instincts.
You have this kind of assassination attempt, frankly, of any world leader anywhere in the globe. It's very unsettling. Shots fired at a former president, i.e., Donald Trump. I've seen this before, Robin. Back when I was very young, I mean, very young, there was a shooting of John F. Kennedy. Later, his brother, Bobby Kennedy, who's running for president. They also tried to kill Gerald Ford. And later, one of Charles Manson's crazy disciples shot Ronald Reagan. But he recovered, and now Donald Trump, unfortunately, joins this terrible list.
And it's interesting, John. When I first heard the word that somebody had tried to assassinate Donald Trump, I thought, well, who's surprised at that? He's a terrible person. A lot of people in Canada don't think that favorably about Donald Trump or the Donald Trump years and the way he behaved. But then again, on reflection, murder is never justified. And it's a political world, and it's a democratic society, the United States. Love it or hate it, it's a democratic society. We live in a democratic society. If people go out willfully shooting people, whether we like them or don't like them, what kind of a society are we living in? It becomes an anarchy. It becomes a terrible place to live, and it's a terrible precedent. And we are trying to read behind the lines about what the motivation was, why this young man would have been shooting at Donald Trump in an open forum like that. And we have a clip now of somebody who was an eyewitness who saw the shooter and couldn't understand why they didn't do something about him before he took his shots.
He had a rifle. Right. You could clearly see him with a rifle. Absolutely. We're pointing at him. The police are down there running around on the ground. We're like, hey, man, there's a guy on the roof with a rifle. And the police were like, oh, what? Like they didn't know what was going on. We're like, hey, right here on the roof. We can see him from right here. We see him. He's crawling. And next thing you know, I'm thinking to myself, why is Trump still speaking? Why have they not pulled him off the stage? I'm standing there pointing at him for, 2-3 minutes. Secret Service is looking at us from the top of the barn. I'm pointing at that roof, just standing there like this. And next thing you know, 5 shots rang out. Crawled up on the roof. They had their guns pointed at him, make sure he was dead. He was dead. And that was it. It was over. Guy was on the roof right there. You can see the white roof.
Robin, I dislike Donald Trump. In fact, easy for me to say that I hate the man and everything that he represents. I believe he's bad for Canada. I believe he's bad for the planet. I believe he's bad for the USA. I also think that the attempt on his life could create huge public sympathy, which will help him win re-election in November. Oh my God, this is all bad news. But still, killing our leaders, violence, is the worst kind of crimes in the worst of times. You cannot kill people when you disagree with their viewpoints. Let's hope this isn't going to be a new trend moving forward. And now, to give us his opinion about the recent Donald Trump attempted assassination is podcaster, reporter, former counselor, Stephen Andrew.
Well, I guess the first thing I say, I just abhor political violence, and this is the latest in a string of violent situations that have occurred over the years. As far as assassination attempts go, to the former president, I think it has strengthened his campaign. I think that iconic image of him raising his fist after the bullet pierced his ear is going to be something that is historic, is an historic picture. And I think that combined with the latest decision by Judge Eileen Cannon that said that the classified documents case, she threw it out, I think has strengthened his case. The Democrats themselves, I think, have got a lot of work to do now because they've got to basically do a complete turnaround on how they're going to run their campaign. They have the whole issue with Joe Biden and the concerns with their own party. So, I mean, I think it strengthens his campaign, and I mean, we'll have to wait and see what's going to happen, how they're going to portray this. But on an overall basis, I think it certainly has shaken up the campaign, and will make it very, very different.
So if Donald Trump wins, and the trend lines seem to point in that direction at least this week, if he wins, what kind of news is that for the world and for Canada?
Well, I mean, if you believe what's being said internationally, there's some serious concerns about it. I mean, I think his foreign policy is very, we say, shaky. I don't think it exceeds confidence. Domestically, though, for Canada, I mean, traditionally the Democratic Party has had what we would call a more protectionist view of trade than Republicans. So, I mean, I don't see much what's going on there. I mean, Trump's first term was chaos, really. I mean, there was some successes, but certainly it was a lot of chaos. And I think there's going to be a lot of fear, and I think there could be a lot of instability as we go through the next 4 years, should he be successful in November.
Internationally, we have a mess with Donald Trump. Locally, we have a mess with what's still going on our streets. It's been a mess for quite some time, and it's reflected not just in Victoria, but in Nanaimo, Greater Vancouver, across the province, across the country. We have this escalation of tent cities, the homeless, drug addicted, mentally barriered, dangerous situations that just don't seem to be improving. And we have another example that's happened on the South Island. A young female social worker kicked in the face by a barriered, dangerous man emerging from a tent on Pandora. Police arrive at the scene, surrounded by an ugly mob. The fire department has to go in with axes to ward these people off so they can get this person, this injured person, safely out of this terrible situation. And when I first came to Victoria back in the 70s to go to UVic, I was told that Victoria rolled up the sidewalks at 8 o'clock. It was the safest place you could possibly live. Well, obviously, that is not the case anymore. And, John, there's now a big movement to clean up our streets, do something about trying to solve this terrible problem. Governments don't seem to be moving forward in a meaningful way. Lots of talk, lots of studies, lots of committees, lots of money being spent, but where are the solutions? And I think the polls are starting to reflect this.
Robin, 6 months ago, you and I would never have predicted this. We chatted about it quite a bit and thought there's no way in hell that recent polls show the BC Conservatives and the NDP neck and neck, both with about 37% from decided voters. Greens sitting around 10%. They're not moving anywhere. And the BC United, according to some polls, is in fourth place and continuing to go down. Their momentum is down. The split is over. Nobody would have predicted this, as I said, any time in the past 6 months.
Really unusual political times, John, and we recently heard from a very strong provincial and federal liberal, Sheila Orr, that she thinks John Rustad and the BC Conservatives have a real chance of winning in the fall. She didn't think that before. She's starting to think that now. And even former Green Party leader Andrew Weaver, Dr. Andrew Weaver, he says he had a good discussion with John Rustad and the Conservatives and has not completely ruled out voting for them in the coming BC election. And so who will Andrew Weaver end up voting for? And it certainly won't be for the Green Party by all measure, as he has some very strong words about both the provincial and the federal Green Party. And I don't want to take away his thunder, so let's zoom him in.
And now back with us in the Rumble Room, UVic climatologist and recovering politician, Andrew Weaver. Welcome.
It's always a pleasure, and it's true. Recovering is correct, and I'm not sure whether one ever does recover once
Right.
one was a
Well,
politician.
you've been very active, and we have lots of questions, and the people want to know the answers. Andrew, you saw how effective Dr. Bonnie Henry was during the height of the COVID pandemic, but the question is, has she passed her shelf life? She led a study that calls for hard drugs to be made available in clubs, stores, 7-Elevens? Okay, and is now getting massive pushback. Is this an embarrassment for David Eby? And does Bonnie Henry need to step down as BC's chief medical officer?
I think it's healthy to have turnover in all these positions. And I do think she did a quite a good job during the pandemic. I mean, obviously, it was extraordinarily difficult. Obviously, she probably would be the first to say that there's some things she would have done different. But I tend to agree that this was outrageous. No, it's not just outrageous, it's beyond outrageous. It's really clear that the safe supply experiment in BC was more than a colossal failure. My take on it, it did nothing more than create a secondary market for safe drugs in rural communities in BC. People on the street were getting safe supply. And there's models for this. I'll come back to that. But not all, some, if not many, would see this as an opportunity to sell it to someone else, get some money, and then buy the drugs that they're used to, the street drugs. So in essence, you've created enhanced free supply in the market that then is in the hands of dealers who then go and market it maybe to youth, maybe on First Nation reserves. Well, there's evidence for all of these. And so this was a colossal failure. And I am beyond surprised that Dr. Henry would, and I'll use the words, have the gall to actually release a report along the lines that was released, despite of the evidence before us. The decision of whether she remains as health officer or not is not my decision to make. I don't like piling on people. I don't think that's productive. I do think that some serious answers need to be given to the question of why. Where on earth, as everybody knows, is the pathway to treatment and recovery for those on the street? This is the barrier. It is not access to drugs. They're all over the place. The issue is we have a crisis of homelessness and addiction, and there's no pathway to recovery. And until such time as we, deal with the hard issue, the issue of perhaps there are some people who need to be institutionalized. And some people may actually want that. Perhaps there are some who just need a little leg up in a safe housing environment, some youth, some seniors, for example. Like it is not a let's just put more drugs on the market approach. That is not a solution to anything. But what they have done is literally pick one small component of an end-to-end policy pathway and introduce that without thinking about the prevention aspects as well as the pathway to recovery. BC's entire approach on addiction right now is harm reduction. That means that you're keeping people alive. That's great. But are you helping them really? Where is their pathway to recovery? So I'm shocked. But I'm not going to call for the resignation of a public health officer or anything like that, because that's not my business. I think others can do that.
Andrew, would like to know your reaction. I kind of think I know what it is, but your reaction to BC Green leader Sonia Furstenau double downing on this.
No.
And yes, this came out
on CFAX, I think, wasn't it? On CFAX, she.
Oh yeah. And saying, yes, we support this. We want this. We want this policy.
There should be even more access to drugs.
So,
well, maybe some Green Party members are looking for free access. That's just
hey,
what?
I guess that's the answer.
Have I ever been at a loss for words?
I know.
That's not something I think
you see desperation. I think that's the real underlying question there about Sonia Furstenau is taking this position. She's trying to run contrary to the NDP. The NDP government has come out and said we don't support this, the tabling of this. We're not going to support what this report is suggesting. They've backed off on it, and Sonia Furstenau is now jumping in and saying, "No, this is the right way to go." Is that because she needs to have a constituency again? She needs to get some people behind her so she can get reelected.
I have no idea what the political strategy is there, because it's certainly not an evidence-based strategy.
Let's move to another Green leader. We're having fun here with the Green leaders. We've just talked about Sonia. You had some problems with some of her communication. I'd like to ask you about Well, I'd like to talk about media conferences, press conferences. You've certainly presided on a few of those, provincial. You've spoke to the federal media. You've spoken internationally to the media. And I was wondering what you were thinking about Elizabeth May getting in front of the national press, where she blamed the older generation for global warming and, quote, said baby boomers have effed the planet. And she used the full word for that. I mean, do you think that's
Well,
effective communication skills?
again, it's last one turn out the lights in the Green parties in Canada. Like what was she thinking? I mean, and then in that same interview, she went and railed on Trudeau as being long past his best before date. Pot, meet kettle, kettle, meet pot. Like it's I, I don't know what's going on in the Green parties. I mean, I know it was difficult for me when I led the BC Green Party to keep at bay some of the more radical ideology that wanted to emerge from below the surface. Of course, all small parties have to deal with people who start coming to them in droves and try to, not so much take over, but influence them in their direction to amplify their otherwise somewhat muted voices because they're kind of extreme. I get that. I had to deal with that. But the leader's not supposed to do that. And when you have a leader like Elizabeth essentially saying that, frankly, at the same time as your deputy leader is bailing on the party, and it was just it was again, I'm at a loss for words.
Yes.
It was
Yes. Well,
unstuck. It was unstuck, completely unstuck. And
let me
I
jump in.
spent a lot. I'm going to answer it now because
Okay, right
I've
on, right
got
on.
it
Let's go. Let's rumble.
Let him
because
answer. Let him
I
answer the question, John.
yeah,
Let him
I'm
answer the
sorry. I'm
question.
sorry. I'm just like you're just okay. So imagine that I've spent my entire career in the field of climate science. Actually, probably I've been interviewed by you, Robin, back in the day when you were on check. I've been here doing that for so long. Anyway, so it's well known in climate science communication that blaming and fear mongering and extremism is not something that advances the policy you're looking for. Clearly, you have to make people aware of the problem. It's a really big problem, but there are solutions. And the key is to focus and empower people and give them the agency to make a difference. When you blame people like that, when you then drop the F bomb, you were essentially turning off everyone over the age of about 60 and saying to them, you don't matter. You are a bunch of evil people. Well, Elizabeth May, take a look in the mirror. You're a boomer too, right? And I suspect your carbon footprint, based on the amount you have flown around the world, is probably within the top 0.1% of Canadians. So, really, do you have the moral and ethical right to stand on your high horse and call out the rest of Canada? I don't think so. And in doing so, you do more damage than good because you end up labeling a critical issue that is dealing with climate change and greenhouse gas emissions and turning it into a fringe issue, which is everything I've tried to fight against my entire life. Because climate change and dealing with it is really an economic opportunity for innovation to develop the solutions and market those solutions to advance society into a low carbon emitting society. It's an incredible economic opportunity. And I've spent my entire life trying to get people, whether it be Gordon Campbell, whether it be John Horgan, whether it be John Rustat, to understand how we're often thinking about it in the wrong terms. We're seeing climate change through the lens of hopelessness and despair because of this big problem that is manifesting itself. We're not looking at it as a big problem for which there are solutions and opportunities that we need to focus on. And Elizabeth May would do a lot better looking at the former. And frankly, to finish now that I've, framed what I was going to say, Mr. Trudeau, for whatever she says, has done more with Jonathan Wilkinson as the environment minister and the energy minister to advance climate policy in an end-to-end manner than any other prime minister. And for her to call him out the way she did is also objectionable because honestly, despite what she might say, she hasn't accomplished anything. And nor has Sonia Furstenau. Because if you're working in a party that has such a small percentage of popular support, yet potentially a powerful voice, you have a duty not to shout at other people and parties, but actually to see how you can work with them to advance solutions.
We'll have more of Andrew Weaver and more of Steve and Andrew and more of all sorts of great people on future Rumble Rooms. We're about time to wrap on this one. And John, it's great that we've had so many people tune in to watch our program. We always encourage you to please retweet us. If you're watching this program on Twitter, retweet it. Like the program on Facebook. Get on board with our different platforms. Maybe before we say goodbye, you could again run through where people can watch the Rumble Room.
Absolutely, Robin. We are getting a ton of activity on Twitter, on X. People are retweeting us, re-Xing us. They are forwarding our tweets. It's just exploding on that platform, and we really appreciate it because there's a lot of commentary. We're also on Facebook. We're on YouTube, where all of our videos live. In fact, you can go back 2.5 years and see us in our first days. So much fun.
We were so much younger then.
I had a lot of hair. You must all go back to then. I had a full head of hair. We also have an audio podcast that you can listen to us if you need to. We're also on Instagram, and we're also on TikTok. So, by the way, thank you to all of the over 2 million folks that have listened to us. Cumulative views. I will update that very, very soon. I remain your humble servant with the mission of uncovering the issues. Boy, do we have a lot of them. And hopefully reflecting views that many of my fellow British Columbians and Canadians hold near and dear. Today, I'm going to be Mr. Maple Leaf, Johnny Jerusalem.
John, I'm so happy to hear you say that because, I never want you to turn over a new leaf because then you'd be up a tree. I'm Robin Adair and rumble on.